In this video, we will show you how to replace your fuel tank on this Honda Accord. This will be located under your vehicle. Let's get into it. Okay friends, let's get started on our job. The first thing we'll mention is, since we're dealing with fuel, if you're working indoors, make sure you're in a well-ventilated area. Hand and eye protection at all times. With that said, let's start at the negative battery terminal. Use a 10mm to loosen this so you can remove it from the battery. Now we can start removing fuel pressure from in the system. If you were to look along the driver's side of the fuel rail, you're going to find the plug. To remove this, we're going to be using a 12mm. There will be fuel pressure in the system, so we'll make sure we have something to collect any of the fuel that makes its way down. See a little bit of fuel come out of there. We'll just let that evacuate real quick. And now we'll close this up and make sure it's tight. Right there is bottomed out. Dispose of this rag properly. Open your fuel door, remove your fuel cap. We'll turn this counterclockwise. A quick inspection of that seal, set it aside. Safely raise and support the rear of the vehicle so you can make your way under. Now, just in front of the driver's side rear tire, we're going to remove this plastic panel from along the side of the fuel tank. You'll find that you have two plastic push clips holding this in place and two 10mm headed bolts. We'll start with the push clips. For those, carefully remove the center portion, and then you should be able to remove the outer portion as well. Now we'll make our way to this one, same process, carefully remove the center portion to unlock it, and then the outer portion as well. Now we can remove two 10mm headed mounting bolts. There's one along the rear towards where that clip was. Let's get this one. Make sure we're holding onto that shield at the same time, of course. With the plastic shield out of the way, you can see your fuel line leading down in this area. This does have a metal fitting which leads into the fuel line. You want to make sure you spray down this area with some penetrant so you don't cause any damage to the line itself. We'll let that sit and do its job while we continue. With that out of the way, we have a clear view of where our fuel filler neck connects onto the fuel hose here. We're going to loosen this clamp with a 10mm. Now, since our clamp is rotted and we know we're replacing it anyways, I'm going to use some cutters and we'll cut this right out of place. Otherwise, you do want to make sure you remove it and give it a close inspection. We'll use a hose pick to make sure we separate this from the fuel filler neck. Keep in mind there could be fuel in this area. A quick inspection of that hose, of course. If it looks like it's torn, worn, or damaged in any way, you need to go ahead and replace that all the way up to where it connects onto the fuel tank. Now we can make our way to this fuel line here. For this, of course, we're going to squeeze on the clamp. You can use pliers or your hands if necessary. We'll be using a hose pick to separate this. Once again, double checking to make sure this is soft and pliable. We'll set that aside. Now we're going to start removing the fuel tank straps. To remove the fuel tank strap, you want to make sure that you have some support underneath the fuel tank. The fuel tank can be heavy. While holding pressure here, we can start dismounting the fuel tank straps. To remove the fuel tank strap, you'll find that you have a 14mm headed mounting bolt along the back side and also along the front side. Let's start along the back here. Now we'll make our way up to the front here. Make sure you're holding onto the strap. Now we can remove the fuel strap from the vehicle. Now to remove our other fuel tank strap, we're going to have to dislodge our shield that goes above the exhaust. To do this, you're going to find that you have two 10mm headed mounting bolts holding it in place. After you remove those, you should be able to pull down on this so you can gain access to your mounting bolt. There's one. Now let's get the other one. Just pull on the exhaust if necessary. Now we can move from the center towards the passenger side of this heat shield. There's another 10mm bolt. Go ahead and remove that. Now we can pull down the heat shield just enough that we can gain access in this area. You may find that the emergency brake cable makes its way along this area, impeding your ability to remove the bolt. We'll use a 12mm to remove this bolt. Slide that shield out of the way, and we can remove our 14mm headed bolt that's holding the fuel strap to the body of the vehicle. Now we can follow that strap to its rearward mounting point here. We'll remove this 14mm headed mounting bolt as well. Now we can get the strap out of here. Let's move along the driver's side of the fuel tank. It's time to start disconnecting our fuel lines. Start down along the bottom here, this clamp, you just want to squeeze it. You can slide that out of the way. We'll separate the hose from the line. You may have to give it a twist. We'll just rest this back on here temporarily, continue on to the other hose. This one you can't really see the clamp, but it's up along the top. Let's get this other clamp off of here. This is a pretty basic clamp. For this one, you can just replace it with a wire tie if necessary. We'll break it free. Separate that. Now we'll just mark this real quick. Can't mix up those lines. Nice. Now to remove the fuel line here, we'll be using a flare 14mm. Just get it right on the fuel line. If you find you have a hard time turning this counterclockwise to remove it, you could try tapping on the wrench with a rubber mallet. Whatever you do, be extremely careful not to cause any sparks. I just gotta get it on there first. Once it's broken free, you can switch to an open-end wrench if necessary. With that dislodged, we'll continue on by removing the rest of this area here with a 10 millimeter. This one. With those fuel lines disconnected, the next thing we can do is start lowering the fuel tank down. But keep in mind, you do still have electrical connectors located up along the top. Along the backside here, you have where your fuel filler is. You want to make sure that's not getting torn. As you make your way towards the front over there, you also have the heat shield. So we're just going to have to maneuver this around a little bit as we continue making our way down. We'll also be paying attention along the backside here. You're going to find that you have wiring that makes its way across. I'm just going to separate it from its mounting point. Typically, you just want to tug on it. You can lift up on the ear. It's fairly easy to pull right out of place. Now, once you do have the tank down far enough, you want to make sure that you disconnect your two electrical connectors that I had spoken of. They're right up along the top of the tank. Each one of them is protected. Go ahead and remove the rubber protective boot, and then you're going to start removing the wiring harness. On each one of these wiring harnesses, you'll find that it does have a locking tab. You want to squeeze that in and disconnect it. After you do have it disconnected, a quick inspection for corrosion, of course, will set that aside. Now let's make our way over to the other side of the tank. This boot off of here. Now for this one, the locking tab's actually on the outside here. Go ahead and squeeze that in and we'll pop this one out of place as well. Once again, a quick inspection for corrosion. This looks great. Now, once you do have access to the top of the tank, before you start removing anything from along the top here, you want to make sure you remove any debris from in this area so nothing falls inside of the fuel system. With everything cleaned, the next thing we'll do is make our way down along the driver's side of the fuel tank here, where those fuel lines are located. We want to remove this 10 millimeter headed mounting nut that holds the lines in place. Pull down on that. Now, if you were to follow the lines across towards the center here, we're going to separate the hose from this center area. Just use a hose pick for this. Just want to break it free, of course. A quick inspection just like every other time. Now we can continue on to removing all 6 of our mounting nuts holding this in place. We want to remove this 10 millimeter headed mounting nut. We'll take hold of this. You should be able to carefully start lifting it up and away. Once again, being careful not to drop any debris into your fuel system. Just go ahead and take this hose, pull it aside, lift this up and out of place. As you lift this up, keep in mind there will be fuel in this area. We'll put this into a collection receptacle. With the fuel pump assembly out of the way, we'll continue towards the center. Remove this area with an 8 millimeter. There's 3 mounting nuts. We'll set that aside. Let's continue towards the passenger side. We'll be using a 10 millimeter for these 5 mounting nuts. At this point, you can lift your level sensor up and out of here. We're going to have to twist it a little bit as necessary to try to pull it up and out of position. Quick inspection will set this aside. Continue on over at your filler hose. Use a 10mm to loosen up this clamp, and then you can remove the filler hose from the tank itself. If it's stuck in place, we'll be using a hose pick. A quick inspection of that filler hose to ensure that it's in good condition. Now we can remove this hose from inside there. If you were to look inside, you're going to find a squeezable clamp. Squeeze the clamp, remove the hose. A quick inspection to make sure it's not damaged in any way. We'll set this aside. Continue forward on the fuel tank. We have another squeezable clamp. This one's fairly easy to squeeze just by hand if you needed to. We'll continue on by getting that out of place. Once again, if you need to, use a hose pick. Now it's time for some plastic clips. For this, you want to look along the bottom side. You're going to find that you have squeezable tabs. Go ahead and use some pliers, squeeze them in, and pull this up and out of place. There's those little tabs. Squeeze them with pliers. Now for these, you just want to get underneath them and you should be able to pop them up and out of place. There's one. Make your way down the line. And there it is, friend. Okay, friend, it's time to start installing our brand new fuel tank. Let's start with the plastic clips across the backside here. For these, it's fairly simple. Just line them up, press them into position. There's one. Do the same down the line. Now we've got this other hook type clip. We'll press that right into position. While we're in this area, we'll continue on with our hoses. Press that on there. Install your clamp, give it a tug to make sure it's properly secured. Now it's time to install the fuel level sensor. Before you install the fuel level sensor in the vehicle, it's a good idea to make sure that you remove the gasket and replace it with a brand new one that came with your kit. Go ahead and take hold of that and we'll pull it right out of place. Just pull it right down and off of here. We'll dispose of this properly. Continue on with your brand new seal. When you go to install this, you want to pay attention. Up along the top is where you're going to find your little alignment tab, so we'll make sure we bring this all the way up and get it in the proper position. Starting down along the bottom here, we'll just work it all the way up there. Careful not to put a tear on it. While bringing this up, let's have a look along the top of this area. You have all the mounting bolt holes. You'll also have the locating ports, but one of them is a lot larger than the others. Looking at the seal, you're going to find the exact same thing. You have that larger one. We'll make sure that everything fits into place and press it in. There's one. That second one right there. And the last one. Carefully start bringing this down into the fuel tank now. We want to make sure we have the electrical connector facing towards what would be the rear of the vehicle. While holding that in position, you'll find that you have 5 brand new nuts. We'll start them on and snug them up. Double check to make sure it's completely secured in place. Continuing towards the center, you know what to do. We're going to remove the gasket. We'll pop that right off of there. Dispose of that properly. Now, while holding everything together, we're going to continue on with our brand new gasket. This one's fairly simple to put on. All of the locating tabs are the exact same. You just want to line them up and press it through. The areas that you do want to press them through is through this white area here, which can pivot, and through the upper plate. We want to make sure everything's properly aligned while you continue on. See that going through. Now we'll take this and get it in position. Make sure that you have the port for the hose facing towards what would be the driver's side of the fuel tank. Now we have our 3 8mm headed mounting nuts. Go ahead and start those on and snug them up. Before you can install the fuel pump assembly, make sure that you remove the gasket and install a brand new one. We'll just take this and pull it right out of place, making sure that nothing falls into the fuel tank. Slide that right down and off of there. We're going to bring it down and over that screen. We'll dispose of that. Time for installation of the brand new gasket. We'll make sure that we take this and align it properly as we bring it up and over. Looking along the bottom side here, you can tell that you have several holes that are larger than others. The large holes are the stud holes. The smaller holes are the locating tabs for the gasket. So we'll just make sure we line them up and press it together. Now it's time to install this into the vehicle. We'll carefully bring it down, making sure that the strainer screen makes its way down first. As you continue bringing it down, once again, we're making sure we're in the proper orientation. For this, we want to make sure we have the fuel hoses facing towards the driver's side. Just give this a little twist. Now we've got our... Now we'll install our 6 10mm mounting nuts. Start them on, snug them up. When we tighten these, we'll make sure we go in a crisscross manner. Double check to make sure everything's completely secured. Let's take hold of this hose, we'll slide it into place. Give it a nice tug to make sure it's completely secured. If it feels as though it wants to slide off easily, use a wire tie. The next thing that you absolutely need to do is make sure that you empty out the contents of your fuel tank and recycle it properly. Now, looking along the top of the original tank, you want to make sure that you remove all 7 of the rubber insulators making their way across the top. You can see them all over here. Now on the brand new tank, I've made markings where we're going to be installing each one of those insulators. It's in the same spot as the original fuel tank. When you go to install the insulators, you're going to find that they're not sticky anymore, but we do want to make sure they at least stay in place while we put the fuel tank up to the body of the vehicle. You can use pretty much anything that'll stick. I'm just going to use some gasket maker. Use a little bit here. Stick it on. Make our way over. As we start bringing the fuel tank up into the original position, it's important to make sure that we bring it up and over this heat shield area where the exhaust is. But also, as we continue bringing it up, we want to be paying attention to our wiring. We have each one of those connectors that need to be connected in before we're all the way in the upright position. Let's get this electrical connector in here. Just line it up and press it in. Use our protective boot, of course. Double check, make sure that's seated all the way around. And then don't forget about the electrical connector for your fuel level sensor. Press it in, listen for a click, we'll give it a nice tug. Protect that area, of course, with our protective boot. Let's pay attention over along the driver's side where our filler neck is. We want to make sure we have these hoses making their way up and over the rearward subframe so they align with the filler neck. Now we can take our filler hose. We want to make sure we bring this up and over the subframe. I already have my brand new clamp on here, so that'll be easy to gain access to. We'll just flex this as needed. Right up there. Now while this is in this position, we'll continue raising the fuel tank so we can align this area. Continue bringing the tank up into the proper position here. Let's get that filler hose on there. Get the clamp in the original position and make sure everything's nice and tight. Double check to make sure this area is completely secured. You don't want to have a fuel leak every time you gas up your vehicle. Let's get this next hose on here, right along the side of it. Once again, pressing it on as far as possible. And we'll re-secure it with the clamp. Let's continue along the driver's side. We're going to reconnect our fuel line. We'll start with the fitting area. You want to make sure that you align this. After that, go ahead and start on that fitting. We're going to leave it loose. Now with that started on, let's continue on with our two 10mm headed bolts. Once you have both of those in and tight, you can continue tightening this fitting. Get this lined up. Right there's where it bottoms out. Let's make sure it's nice and tight. Right there's where it bottomed out. Let's make sure it's nice and tight using a flare wrench. We'll make sure we tuck the hose into its mounting point along this area. Let's continue on here. We'll take hold of these two lines, give them a light tug downward, and then you can slide the stud up and through the fuel tank. Continue on with your 10mm headed mounting nut. Let's connect the rest of these hoses across here. You want to make sure you have them in the proper orientation. We did mark those. Now for this one, I had to break the clamp. It was a small clamp. We'll be using a wire tie. We'll trim off the excess. Moving along to the next hose here, you just want to take hold of that and we'll slide that into place as well. This one does have the original clamp, so that's what we'll be using. When you install the clamps, once again, we do want to make sure we can see hose on both sides of that hose. This is perfect. Let's get our plastic side panel in here. We want to make sure we have it properly aligned, coming along the side of the fuel tank. Up along this area, towards the front of that plastic panel is where your push clip will go. For your push clips, you want to start in the outer portion first and then drive in the center to lock it in position. This is where you're going to be using your shanked 10mm headed mounting bolts. Just go ahead and start each of those in. We're not going to snug them up yet though. Got one here and one over here. Make our way back here for this one. Now with everything started in, let's snug it up. Now we can get this one. Make our way to the far rear. We've got one more push clip holding this to the fuel tank itself. Now we can install our fuel tank straps. We'll be starting with the driver's side strap. Start in that front bolt, leave it loose. Do the same to the rear. After that, you can snug them up and torque these to 28 foot-pounds. Okay, let's snug it up. We'll make our way back here, same thing, start it in. There we are. Now we'll make our way back here. We can snug this and torque it to 28 foot-pounds as well. Let's make our way over towards the passenger side fuel tank strap. We'll get this properly aligned, start in that mounting bolt. There's that one. Okay, they're both started. Snug them up, torque those to 28 foot-pounds. Get back up here, we'll snug this one up. As you can tell, it's almost impossible to get a torque wrench in here. Just make sure it's nice and tight. Now we can resecure our emergency brake cable. We'll be using our 12mm on that mounting bolt. Let's get this in place. Remove support from under your fuel tank. Now it's time to resecure our heat shields. We'll start in the center area here and make our way towards the rear. All right, they're all started in, snug them up. Double check to make sure everything's properly secured. Reinstall your fuel cap. We'll take this and turn it clockwise until you hear a click. Close the door. Back under the hood, we're going to reconnect our negative battery terminal. We'll take this and carefully put it in place. Press it down onto the battery as far as possible and tighten your 10mm mounting nut. Double check to make sure both of your terminal ends are properly secured. Okay, friend, we finished the installation of our fuel tank. The last thing you want to do is go ahead and top it off and check for leaks. After that, take it for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.